3 questions you may ask, the crone said once she had her drink. You will not like my answers. Ask or be gone with you. Go, the dreaming queen thought. Hold your tongue and flee. But the girl did not have sense enough to be afraid. When will I wed the prince, she asked. Never. You will wed the king. Beneath her golden curls, the girl's face wrinkled up in puzzlement. For years after, she took those words to mean that she would not marry Rhaegar until after his father Aerys had died. I will be queen though, asked the younger her. Aye, malice steamed in Maggy's yellow eyes. Queen you shall be, until comes another, younger, more beautiful, to cast you down and take all that you hold dear. Anger flashed across the child's face. If she tries, I will have my brother kill her. Even then she would not stop. Willful child as she was, she still had one more question due her, one more glimpse into her life to come. Will the king and I have children, she asked. Oh aye, 6 and 10 for him, and 3 for you. That made no sense to Cersei. Her thumb was throbbing where she'd cut it, and her blood was dripping on the carpet. How could that be? She wanted to ask, but she was done with her questions. The old woman was not done with her, however. Gold shall be their crowns, and gold shall be their shrouds, she said. And when your tears have drowned you, the Valonqar shall wrap his hands around your pale white throat and choke the life out of you. So who is the Valonqar? Who is the more beautiful queen to cast her down? And how will this all tie into Cersei's eventual path to self-destruction? To really understand this, we're going to have to understand who Cersei is as a character and what role George R.R. Martin plans for her. Because it has changed the more George has garnered his story. Funnily enough, Cersei wasn't even a character until George R.R. Martin decided to split Jaime Lannister into 2. In the original outline, George stated that Jaime Lannister will follow Joffrey to the throne of the Seven Kingdoms by killing everyone ahead of him in the line of succession and blaming his brother Tyrion for the murders. He chose a different, more redemptive path for Jaime and made his identical twin Cersei follow Jaime's original outline. So her children, Myrcella, Tommen and Joffrey, all die, and she blames Tyrion for their deaths. Her paranoia of him is highlighted heavily in the books, not only fearing for her own death, but the death of Tommen's and Myrcella by the hands of Tyrion. Cersei's character is fundamentally self-destructive, as illustrated by her adherence to Tywin's ruthless teachings. This is evident in scenes where she mimics his merciless behaviour despite feeling repulsed by it. Lord Qyburn ran a hand up the blue bard's chest. Does she take your nipples in her mouth during your love play? He took one between his thumb and his forefinger and twisted. Some men enjoy that. The nipples are as sensitive as a woman's. The razor flashed. The singer shrieked. On his chest, a wet red eye wept blood. Cersei felt ill. Part of her wanted to close her eyes, to turn away, to make it stop. But she was the queen, and this was treason. Lord Tywin would not have turned away. I think this scene in the books describes her character arc very well, because Cersei was, at least in part, taught to be this way. You can see it in the court above. She's carrying out Tywin's teachings. Nobody taught Tywin to do the evil things he does. He came up with all that himself. Cersei is what happens when you teach a girl that power and status are the only things that matter in the world, and then let her out into a world where women aren't really allowed to have either. It's her ultimate inability to exert real power in this world. She's fighting against this patriarchal machine, fighting to gain power and play the man's game. But no matter how much she struggles, she's going to end up crushed between the gears. It's pretty clear that her actions have led to her downfall and will be the fulfillment to Maggy's prophecy. And this will help explain who the younger, more beautiful queen that will cast her down is, and who the Valonqar that will strangle her to death is. Cersei's ending in the books have been foreshadowed heavily, and using the show we can start to piece together what her ending will entail. The most important clue as to how Cersei's demise will take place is the Maggy the Frog prophecy. Now before I talk about the prophecy, it's incredibly important to discuss why the prophecy came about in the first place, because it was only added after George R.R. Martin's 5-year time jump was going to be scrapped. For those of you that don't know, George R.R. Martin originally wanted a 5-year time jump after A Storm of Swords, the 3rd book, was completed, to age the characters up and jump into the main plot of Phase 2 of the story, Phase 1 being the War of the Five Kings. Essentially, he tried to make this 5-year gap work, but he couldn't because of how difficult it was to write, since it would have been a lot of flashbacks of characters filling in on what occurred during those 5 years. For characters like Arya, where she's just trading in the House of Black and White, it was completely fine. But for characters like Cersei in King's Landing, it was a lot more difficult due to the complexity of King's Landing as a location. It worked for characters like Arya and Dany, but not so much the adults or those who had a lot of action coming. He was writing chapters where Jon thought, well, not a lot have happened in the past 5 years, it's been kinda nice. And Cersei chapters where she thought, well, I've had to kill so many people in the last 5 years. So he ended up dropping it. He said he would have done it soon if he hadn't told so many fans about it. And there is no gap anymore. If a 12-year-old has to conquer the world, then so be it. So you may be asking, how does this relate to Cersei? Well, this shift in the timeline directly impacts Cersei's narrative. Without the jump, her descent into madness and paranoia has to accelerate, affecting the trajectory of other characters and the overall plot. I don't want to go on too much on a tangent, but in my opinion, Dany was originally supposed to attack a relatively stable King's Landing in A Dance with Dragons in Book 6. 3 more volumes of A Song of Ice and Fire wait to be written. What shape do you expect them to take, and are their titles finalised yet? Yes, 3 more volumes remain. The series could almost be considered as 2 linked trilogies, although I tend to think of it more as one long story. The next book, A Dance with Dragons, will focus on the return of Daenerys Targaryen to Westeros, and the conflict that creates. But with the time skip scrapped, Daenerys is going to take longer to get to King's Landing, and Aegon or Euron are likely to drive Cersei off to Casterly Rock. This is the major consensus within the fandom. Essentially, Cersei is no longer going to be the main opposition for Daenerys like in the show, and it is very likely that Aegon will take King's Landing pretty easily. We again have large amounts of evidence pointing this way in her vision of the Undying. A cloth dragon swayed on poles amidst a cheering crowd. Cersei will likely be driven away by either the common folk or because Aegon takes it by force. Now it's at this point where I want to do some cross-referencing with the first A Dance of Dragons conflict, and I know a lot of people aren't caught up with the House of Dragon TV shows, so skip to this point if you want to avoid spoilers for the show. Alright, so Cersei Lannister is the most obvious Rhaenyra parallel. When we meet these characters, they're considered ridiculously beautiful, but as time passes, their beauty fades. Rhaenyra loses her beauty because of her pregnancies and for eating sweet stuff, and Cersei for drinking so much wine. Both characters exhibit a strong sense of entitlement. Rhaenyra's is somewhat justified by her claim on the throne, whereas Cersei stems from her ruthless ambition. They both grow paranoid and think that everyone's out to get them. This causes Rhaenyra to lose a dragon, and Cersei's downfall will be because of this. Her daemon, Jaime, abandoned her in the Riverlands with another woman. I think the city will rise against her rule after the death of the younger, more beautiful queen, Margaery. It was Helena for Rhaenyra, and it's a good subversion of the younger, more beautiful queen prophecy that the death of the queen Cersei feared will ironically cause her downfall. She will lose all her bastard children like Rhaenyra and flee to her ancestral home, Casterly Rock, crowning herself Queen of the Rock. Just as a side note, the Valonqar prophecy says that Cersei's little brother will kill her, so perhaps Cersei will be killed by her little brother as Rhaenyra was. So, to summarise really quickly, I think Daenerys was supposed to attack a relatively stable King's Landing under the Tyrell Lannister regime after the 5-year time jump. But after the 5-year gap was scrapped, Daenerys wouldn't have been able to arrive in King's Landing because she's stuck in Meereen and she has tons of things to resolve. Vaes Dothrak, Meereen, Volantis, Illyrio, the house with the red door reveal, like he originally planned. So he committed on Aegon attacking King's Landing and taking it. The easiest way for this to happen is for Cersei's descent into madness to be quickened so that she can be ousted by Aegon a lot easier, which is why Maggy's prophecy was retconned. There's a few reasons why I think Cersei will most likely be driven out by the small folk. 1. King's Landing is difficult to take without a fleet, which Aegon doesn't have. 2. It makes it very difficult for Cersei to escape King's Landing and make it to Casterly Rock if this is the case. Remember during the Battle of the Blackwater, Cersei was about to poison herself as an only out. There's no reasonable way Cersei would be able to escape. In my opinion, she has to escape and make it to Casterly Rock. She still has some unfinished business in the books and won't die due to Aegon. If King's Landing has to be sacked to be taken, it would be a problem since in Dany's vision of the House of the Undying, she saw a cloth dragon swayed on poles amidst a cheering crowd. It would be difficult for her to achieve a cheering crowd from the small folk if King's Landing needs to be sieged and sacked by Aegon. However, if the small folk turn on Cersei in King's Landing and drive her out, then it would make more sense for Aegon to walk into King's Landing with the cheers of the small folk. Of course, it could be a combination of Cersei turning the small folk against her and then Aegon taking King's Landing by force, but that would not account for the first 2 points. I prefer riots because they give meaning to the whole build-up of the Faith Militant and the small folk. Fundamentally, however, it would make much more sense for Cersei's character arc if she was the one to drive the small folk against her, due to her paranoia and incompetence as a ruler, which is accelerated because of the prophecy. From the show, Cersei blows up the Sept of Baelor, killing both Margaery and the High Septon. Unfortunately, in the show, Cersei faces no repercussions from this, but this will play out differently in the books. The death of the former popular queen Margaery will be blamed on her, which will cause discontent among the small folk. Her dealing with the Faith Militant will also cause even more restlessness within the people of King's Landing. I really don't buy the idea that she'll blow them up with wildfire like in the show, but whatever way she dispenses of them, she's most likely going to face the backlash of the small folk. I feel like since D&D cut out Aegon and Euron,
the finger in the bum,
I don't know what that is, but it's not Euron, and made Cersei instead the main opposition, they had to cut out the discontent of the small folk. So they kinda merged George R.R. Martin's ideas of Cersei and Aegon into one character, which just causes discrepancies and inconsistencies within the show. Like, she literally blows up the Pope, the holiest religious site in Westeros, and Princess Diana, and nothing happens. So now you may have a better understanding as to why George R.R. Martin propelled her journey into self-destruction by including the Maggy the Frog prophecy, but how exactly will her story end? There are a few possible candidates to who the younger, more beautiful, to cast you down and take all you hold dear. In my mind, there are only 4 possible candidates, so let's go through the possible options and I'll tell you why I don't think it's them.
I wish we had some wine for you. It's a bit early in the day for us.
Margaery does fulfill the younger, more beautiful part of the prophecy, but does she cast her down and take everything Cersei holds dear? The prophecy says that the younger, more beautiful queen will take all that Cersei holds dear, not just the things she holds dearest. For all Cersei's narcissism, there's a lot that she loves. Jaime, her children, her beauty, but most importantly, her power. She dreamt she sat the Iron Throne high above them all. The courtiers were brightly coloured mice below. Great lords and proud ladies knelt before her. Bold young knights laid their swords at her feet and pleaded for her favours, and the queen smiled down at them. I already mentioned it in the beginning of the video, but George R.R. Martin tells you exactly what Cersei Lannister wants. Power, respect, acclaim, more than anything else.
Power is power.
Margaery, while hindering that, I don't think she really takes the power from her, nor do I think she takes Jaime or her children or her beauty away from her. Margaery doesn't directly lead to her downfall, it's Cersei's fear of her that does. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I think it's pretty obvious that she's not the one who orchestrates her downfall. I feel like it's more of a red herring for Cersei.
I don't serve your brother, Your Grace. But you love him.
Brienne is a very interesting choice because the younger, more beautiful queen doesn't have to be someone conventionally attractive, but someone beautiful in the inside. It would be a great choice since it's a great subversion of expectations for the reader and most specifically Cersei. Especially since Cersei values her external beauty so much. It would be interesting for her to realise that it's the internal beauty the prophecy is talking about. However, does Brienne really take everything Cersei holds dear? I've already talked about Cersei's main motivation being power, but if we ignore that and say that in her last moments Jaime is everything she holds dear, and that Brienne will be the one to take him away from her, there's an argument that Cersei doesn't even love Jaime. She loves that he's a reflection of her, a narcissistic sort of love. So, when Jaime is no longer a mirror to what she is and what she desires to be, she starts treating him like shit. We have 5 books of Cersei's ambition and quest for power being the route for her self-destruction. I don't like the idea that it's reduced to her losing another man's love. I just think there's better alternatives.
You want a good girl, but you need a bad pussy.
So Arianne is mainly due to the fact that she's likely to marry Aegon after the Dornish-Dany alliance went to shit, due to the fact that Quentyn was burned alive by Dany's dragons. As we discussed before, Aegon is likely to reclaim King's Landing, but I already gave evidence as to why I think it will be due to her upsetting the common folk, and not directly due to Aegon's actions. But if for a minute we assume that Cersei does flee due to Aegon taking the city with Arianne by his side, it wouldn't make much sense since it would really be Aegon who's taking what Cersei holds dear, which is power, not really herself. Yes, she may be a part of it by helping Aegon in some way, and she would be a queen for a short time, but I think it's a lot weaker compared to the other contenders.
It's a beautiful dream. Stopping the wheel. You're not the first person who's ever dreamt it.
I'm not going to stop the wheel. I'm going to break the wheel.
Daenerys is an interesting one because I think in the show it was implied that it was her who fulfilled the prophecy. I think Dany is more like what Cersei wants to be or imagines herself to be. A queen who rules in her own right, has huge power in her possession, and will be remembered by the history books. They're sort of mirrored actually. Cersei's path is the path Dany may have taken had she not been liberated through her dragons. They were both sold off as brides as support of warrior kings and have 3 children that they really care about. But unlike the show, I don't think she fits the casting down thing at all. She is too far away for it in the books. If they do interact at Castle Rock, then most of what she holds dear will already be vanquished, and Dany would more be the icing on the cake rather than the main perpetrator. So there's many people it could be referring to. I saw a nice theory somewhere that it could be Marcella. There's a high chance that it's a combination of all these possible candidates, or even that the younger, more beautiful queen will be left vague. But there is one candidate who fits the prophecy perfectly and fits Cersei's arc to a T. But before I reveal the younger, more beautiful queen, Only 1% of you guys are subscribed, so I urge you to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on all the high quality content I've got lined up coming your way. Anyways, as I was saying, the younger, more beautiful queen who ultimately takes everything from Cersei is paradoxically Cersei herself. Now I know it sounds ridiculous, so hear me out for a moment. The prophecy is not straightforward at all. She has been the younger, more beautiful queen whose action takes away all that she holds dear. Firstly, her beauty in feast and dance because of her excessive alcoholism, which causes her to be in complete denial that she's gaining weight from all the alcohol, and even blames her servants for shrinking her clothes.
Go find the breastplate stretcher! Ow!
During her Walk of Atonement, the crowd mocks her faded beauty and aging body, which could have been accelerated because of her increased stress due to the prophecy, and increased weight gain due to the alcoholism to cope with it. Tyenna took her hand and stroked it. This was a hateful woman, old and sick and ugly. You were young and beautiful, full of life and pride. This creature dared not strike you because of who you were, so she sought to wound you with her viper's tongue. Her actions will later make her lose her children, her power, and Jaime after he finds out she was cheating on him. It's not even clear whether Maggy saw this happening in the future, or she just maliciously tried to make Cersei paranoid, and Cersei's own actions taken in order to prevent the prophecy from coming true will actually result in the fulfillment of the prophecy. I am certain that the younger, more beautiful queen will be left vague, although I imagine Cersei realising at the end that she was her worst enemy all along. A fitting conclusion to her character arc in my opinion. This would also mean that her casting down primarily won't happen to the hand of Aegon or Arianne, but herself. Aegon would just enter King's Landing victoriously after she fled due to the fact that she was the one who killed the High Septim and Margaery Tyrell, which would explain why the small folk is happy to see him, which wouldn't be the case if his men took the city by force and sacked it, as I mentioned before. Cersei actually starts going nuts after the Maggy the Frog prophecy. She literally killed the little girl who went in with her so that she wouldn't reveal any of it. She could still hear Melera Heatherspoon insisting that if they never spoke about the prophecies, they would not come true. She was not silent in the well though. She screamed and shouted. The prophecy ruled her life, the constant fear, the wondering, and she always believed it. She never considered it dubious, it's so self-fulfilling. Maggy foresaw the little girl's death, and it was Cersei who causes it. The same way Cersei will ultimately cause her own path to self-destruction. As for the Valonqar, this is already dead and set and very easy to predict. It's quite obviously Jaime. Tyrion could be the Valonqar, but it doesn't add anything to the arc of him or Cersei. Cersei is the important one because the prophecy is about her. And it's repetitive since Tyrion has already killed a family member and choked a woman to death. It's also more difficult to engineer a situation where Tyrion killing Cersei plays out, and it seems incomplete without at least Jaime being present. There's also some clues left by George R.R. Martin in the books after Cersei said that she will have her brother kill the younger, more beautiful queen. Anger flashed across the child's face. If she tries, I'll have my brother kill her. And that's when Maggy responded with the prophecy about the Valonqar. The old woman was not done with her, however. Gold shall be their crowns and gold shall be their shrouds, she said. And when your tears have drowned you, the Valonqar shall wrap his hands around your pale white throat and choke the life from you. Ironically, this foreshadows the prophecy's fulfillment, with Jaime, her Valonqar, destined to be the one who ultimately ends her life. Cersei is also drawn as an obvious Ares parallel. Delusional dreams, paranoia, love of wildfire, and her own pet sorcerer Qyburn, which would foreshadow her being killed by Jaime. Cersei was all wildfire, especially when thwarted. Perhaps a cornered Cersei is about to commit a large-scale destruction like Mad King Ares once intended for the whole of King's Landing, and Jaime has to kill her to stop her from doing so, like he did with King Ares. I don't know, I'm just throwing ideas around. It all goes back, Tyrion thought, to our mothers and fathers and theirs before them. We are puppets dancing on the strings of those who came before us, and one day our own children will take up our strings and dance in our steads. This quote from Tyrion indicates that George R.R. Martin wants history to repeat to an extent, even if the War of the Five Kings is unique. The only problem with Jaime being the Valonqar was that the prophecy specifically mentioned that Cersei would be strangled with both hands. Remember, Jaime only has one hand at the moment, so I'm unsure as to how Jaime would carry out the act. I saw somewhere that Jaime would use a chain of the Hand of the King, the one made out of golden hands that Tyrion used to choke Shae to death. This possibility is even set up with Jaime thinking that he would happily have strangled the Cybele Spicer with her seashell necklace. No more than I want Joy to marry the son of some scheming turncloak bitch. She deserves better. Jaime would happily have strangled the woman with her seashell necklace. But I don't know, it seems a bit of a stretch. Perhaps the prophecy is metaphorical. I still do think it's almost certainly Jaime, however. I've obviously seen some other crazy theories on the younger, more beautiful queen and the Valonqar that are very surprising, but I feel like that would just be bad writing. It's basically either A, sticking with all the foreshadowing and build up and what makes sense for Cersei and Jaime's character arc, but instead going with B, subverting expectations for the sake of subverting expectations. That's what the showrunners did with the last season of Game of Thrones and it failed. The Valonqar or the younger, more beautiful queen should be surprising for Cersei, not the readers. And I think that Cersei being her own worst enemy and realising that makes the best sense for her development as a character. Additionally, Jaime being the Valonqar not only works best for Cersei, but also Jaime. If we look at the show, the Cersei and Jaime relationship was constructed as a more genuine love story, which is why they left out the Valonqar moment.
I've had an exciting life. I want my death to be boring. How do you want to go?
You know, I'm sick of the woman I got.
Whereas in the books, I think George R.R. Martin is trying to deconstruct this whole notion of soulmates. In my opinion, I think that D&D replaced Jaime killing Cersei with Jon killing Daenerys, and would make more sense as to why Jaime returns to Cersei if it were to happen in the books. But what do you guys think? Leave a comment below and let me know. Also, if you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely enjoy these two on Littlefinger and Sansa Stark. But anyways, I'll see you in the next video.